lost Scythians of the Dian kingdom. Zhou explorers and conquerors of southern China. Dian was an ancient kingdom situated in modern Yunnan, southwestern China, in the region around the Dian Lake. According to Han historian Sima Qian, it was established in 279 BCE when King Qingshang of Chu sent a military force to the southwest. The ruling nobility of the state of Chu and many other states during the Warring States era were descended from a white proto-Scythian Aryan people known as Zhou, the founders of the Zhou dynasty, a topic discussed in more detail in a previous video. Chu's nobility had included the famous philosopher Laozi. Of course, this is not to say that the majority of Chu had belonged to this ancestry. Most of them were Mongoloids, and even certain elite groups in Chu had become an admixed people from mixing with commoners. However, certain segments of Chu's nobility had retained a more strongly Europoid phenotype, as strongly suggested by depictions of the Dian kingdom's elites. It was just the nobility. Zhuangqiao, a general of Chu, reached the Dian Lake as part of the Chu military campaign. When the Chu homeland was invaded by the Mongoloid-led Qin dynasty, Zhuangqiao decided to stay in Yunnan and adopt the native ways, establishing the Dian kingdom. The Qin dynasty was subsequently overthrown by the Han, the next Mongoloid-led dynasty of China, and the commanderies of the new dynasty, Ba and Shu, bordered Dian. The Dian Mongoloids of southwestern China were invaded by white Scythian Zhou warriors from Chu in the late Warring States period, and the victorious general was just about to report home when Chu fell to the Mongoloid first emperor of the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty implemented a strict policy of centralized control, placing its own appointed officials in charge of the former Chu area and all other conquered territories. Rather than return to an uncertain future, he turned his army around and settled by the expansive lake, Dian. His elite soldier's style favored dreadlocked horsemen, barefoot in all statuary, and carving tattooed with writhing snakes. Presumably, boots were not comfortable in the tropics. They enjoyed what UNESCO still describes as the most biologically diverse region in the world, spanning the upper reaches of the Yangtze, the Mekong, and the Salween. Since the Red River, which goes all the way to Hanoi, also rises here, the Dian kingdom sat at the crossroads of several major cultures, trading with the Shu and Ba kingdoms of Sichuan, with what is now Vietnam, and towards the west. Over time, some mulatto ethnicities had formed as a result of mixing between the white colonizers and the indigenous southern Chinese groups, while some of the other white nobility groups had remained more segregated. The Dian kingdom arose in the area of the Yunnan Great Lakes. An important role in the emergence of the Dian kingdom belongs to newcomers from the north, who were troops of the Chu kingdom. They were tribes who were familiar with equestrian culture, who subjugated the local inhabitants in 279 BCE. As reported by the great historian Sima Qian in his famous Shiji, Records of the Grand Historian, the commander Zhuangqiao, who relied on his numerous troops, declared himself the Dian Wang, Dian king, changed his clothes, began to follow the local customs, and became a full-fledged ruler. The artistically and technologically advanced Chu culture, brought here by the conquerors, completed the formation of the unique Dian tradition, which manifested itself primarily in bronze items and weapons. Dian was a non-Han metalworking civilization that inhabited the Dian Lake Plateau of central northern Yunnan, China from the late spring and autumn period until the Eastern Han dynasty. The Dian buried their dead in vertical pit graves. The language of the native Dian commoners was likely one of the Tibeto-Burman languages, and their white Scythian Zhou elite may have adopted this language to more effectively rule the region. The Zhou rulers of Dian had likely referred to the conquered Mongoloid inhabitants of Yunnan as the black-haired commoners, a term they had previously used to refer to the Mongoloid serfs of the Zhou dynasty states. The Han Empire's annexation of the Dian kingdom in 109 BCE eventually led to the establishment of the Yizhou commandery. Dian culture started from at least the 8th century BCE. They were invaded by white Zhou descendants in 279 BCE and they fell under the control of the Han Dynasty in 109 BCE. According to the Shiji, the southwest was dominated by barbarians, among whom the ruler of Yilang was the most powerful. To the west of Yilang were the Mimo, and the most powerful among them was the ruler of Dian. North of Dian was Cheongdu. All these people styled their hair in a mallet-shaped fashion. These were settled peoples who worked the fields and lived in settlements. In the area from Tongxi east to Yeyu were the Sui and Kunming tribes, who braided their hair and moved from place to place with their herds. They had no fixed abodes or rulers. Northeast of the Sui were the Shi and Zhuodu. The most powerful of the Zhuodu were the Ran and Mang, who lived west of Shu. Some of them moved from place to place, but others lived in fixed abodes. Northeast of the Ran and Mang were the Baima, who belonged to the Di tribe. The Dian buried their kings at Shizhaishan, which was uncovered in 1954 near Shizhai village in Jining County, Yunnan. The burials were identified by the inscription on King Dian's seal. The inscription was written in seal script on a gold imperial seal of investiture given by the Han Emperor. Sima Qian noted that the Dian were one of only 2 local groups to have received an imperial seal, the other being Yilang. The Dian kingdom's elite used elements of the Chu state's aristocratic mortuary practices. The largest tin deposits on the Eurasian continent are located on the Malay Peninsula, and as such, the Dian people were sophisticated metalworkers, casting both bronze and iron. The Dian cast bronze objects using both the piece mold method and the lost wax method. Dian elite burials contained an impressive array of bronze objects, although late Dian burials also contained locally cast iron objects. Large bronze drums were employed by the Dian to communicate in battle. Ritual burials of Dian elites were accompanied by large bronze drums filled with cowrie shells. The tops of the drums were removed and replaced by a bronze lid. Dian weapon types and decorative motifs had some commonalities with Chu, further solidifying their ruling elite's connection to the Zhou dynasty state of Chu. The scholars Yaroslav Lebedinsky and Victor H. Mayer have concluded that some Sakas had migrated to the area of Yunnan in southern China. However, an important piece of the puzzle which they hadn't figured out was that these Sakas or Scythians were actually former elites of the Chu state, descended from Zhou nobility, as indicated by textual and archaeological evidence. Excavations of the prehistoric art of the Dian civilization of Yunnan have revealed hunting scenes similar to that of Indo-European artwork depicting Europoid horsemen in Central Asian clothing. Horsemen with Europoid facial features like deep-set eyes and tall noses practicing hunting are depicted in circular arrangement on top of drums, a design often encountered in Scythian art. The horsemen elites also have Central Asian-style clothing and daggers. Animal scenes of felines attacking oxen are also reminiscent of Scythian art, both in theme and in composition. The bronze lids were covered with miniature figurines and structures depicting various scenes from the life of the Dian people. The bronze lids depicted the Dian people engaged in everyday activities such as hunting, farming, and weaving. Other scenes depicted the leisurely pursuits of the Dian people, such as bullfighting, dancing, and music-making. The Dian people dressed in tunics over short pants and wore their hair in top knots. The bronze lids corroborated Sima Qian's description of the Dian hairstyle. Many scenes depicted the Dian at war, with Europoid elites riding horses and Mongoloid natives as foot soldiers. Archaeological evidence shows that horses had been domesticated by the Dian people as early as the 6th century BCE, introduced by trading contacts from the steppe and the Zhou dynasty. The bronze lids also depicted the Dian decapitating their enemies, who wore their hair in long plaits. The kingdom was based on agriculture. The bronzes also showed headhunting, human sacrifice of prisoners of war, and slaves as part of Dian society. Archaeologists recently discovered the inundated remains of Dian period buildings and pottery fragments under Fuxian Lake and were able to verify their age with carbon dating. At Dabona, a site connected with the Dian culture, archaeologists discovered a large double coffin burial. The outer coffin was made of wood and the inner coffin was made of bronze. The inner coffin was shaped like a house and weighs over 157 kilograms. The Yunnan Provincial Museum holds many archaeological relics of the Dian culture. Nothing survives of the Dian people, but the stories about them in the grand scribes' records and whatever has been pulled out of their graves. And with the caveat that the graves reflect the lives and attitudes of the ruling elite, it shouldn't surprise us if their artifacts come across as a bit, well, cruel. The Dian kingdom was home to a Mongoloid race of cattle herdsmen ruled over by an equestrian white Scythian elite descended from the Zhou dynasty rulers of the state of Chu, who seemed to take an odd pleasure in depictions of violence. Their shell kettles, cowrie shells were money, come decorated with intricate battle scenes, featuring Mongoloid captives being dragged away for sale, victims pleading for their lives, and a wounded man crawling from the battlefield, unaware that a mounted white cavalryman is bearing down on him. In one of the tableaux, an enemy soldier appears to have the upper hand, not seeing the man on the other side of the battlefield taking aim with one of those new-fangled crossbows invented by white Zhou nobles. The glee in which the white Zhou-descended Dian elites seem to take in the suffering of others may seem foreign from a modern perspective, but was likely a result of living in such a foreign and hostile environment, surrounded by an alien race who they didn't relate to. Violent behavior is repeated throughout their artifacts. Violence was directed against both the Mongoloid Asian tribes and also against rival Europoid Zhou clans. Twin spearheads feature decorations of dangling Mongoloid slaves hanging by their wrists. This cruel treatment of native slaves is reminiscent of early Shu kingdom artifacts in Sichuan, which show bronze figurines of kneeling Mongoloid slaves and captives in subservient and humiliating positions, while the long-faced, large-eyed, prominent-nosed figurines of the white Aryan elite, the descendants of Kankong, are portrayed as having a regal posture. Archaeologists from Yunnan province discovered a bronze object about 38 centimeters high while conducting archaeological research on Shizhai Mountain in Jining. The experts found a bronze lid that matched the jar, but the contents on the lid made the experts' heart cold. There are 52 little figures with mostly Mongoloid features densely carved on the lid. These little figures are lifelike. Some are naked with their arms tied and shackled. Some are aristocratic women with Europoid traits riding on a sedan chair, and some are executioners holding a giant axe. It was the bloody sacrificial activity of slaughtering captured slaves and prisoners of war, and then offering sacrifices to the gods. The white Zhou-descended elites had adopted some more extreme sacrificial customs after invading southern China and going native. The expressions of each villain were portrayed as extremely realistic. For this reason, the experts named it the Copper Shell Reservoir in the scene of human sacrifice in the Western Han Dynasty. Another artifact shows the king sitting on top under a roof facing away from the to-be-sacrificed man. He is the only one who sits in a chair. Even though he's sitting down, he's far taller than any of the Mongoloid commoners who surround him. His facial features are extremely blatantly Europoid. He has a long, prominent nose, thick brow ridges, a full beard, and a pointed cap, reminiscent of the Sakas. The Mongoloid commoners have flat faces, wide noses, and they wear their hair in a top knot. There are 8 persons who offer him food. They all sit on their heels in the dirt. The roofed area is the center of the sacrificial event. In Plate 2, there are many Mongoloid commoners carrying weapons and instruments of punishment. A naked man is tied to a sculpted rock. It is difficult to determine the provenance of this particular victim. Looking at his facial features, he seems different from the Mongoloid commoners, possibly a mixed-race enemy of the king. This vessel symbolizes socio-political authority in more than a single dimension. The vessel is a shell container, a symbol of economic wealth and power. It is shaped in the form of a drum, an important ritual instrument and political tool. It depicts on the lid a sacrificial ritual with the white Scythian Zhou god king as the chief ritualist. The enemy victim is tied to the ancestral shrine. This is also where he is going to be killed, undoubtedly as a way to pay respect to the ancestors, thanking them for a good year or as a prayer for a good year to come. At the same time, it is an important social event, consolidating the community under the worldly and religious authority of the king. The white Europoid featured elites are frequently portrayed in Dian bronzes as being in an upper caste position within their society, very reminiscent of the Aryan-ruled Vedic culture in India. One scene depicts a high-status woman with a long, narrow face, large eyes, and a tall nose bridge being carried in a palanquin by Mongoloid slaves with wide faces and wide, flat noses. She's shaded by a parasol. Some other tall figures with long, tall noses, large eyes, and thin lips can be seen coming to greet the elite woman, while the rest of the figures in the scene have Mongoloid phenotypes.
Container depicting a marketplace gives us a sense of the bustling economy of the ancient Dian kingdom. The most striking feature is a sedan chair carried by 4 men, with a fully gilded woman seated inside. She has her hair styled in a silver ingot-shaped bun and bears a solemn expression, indicating she is likely a noblewoman or leader. Leading the sedan chair are 2 mounted men, while behind it, a man holds a long-handled parasol to provide shade. Additional attendants follow on either side. In short, the piece is a reflection of the social hierarchy of ancient Dian society. In the marketplace, figures are depicted carrying shovels, bags, jars, and stretching cloth, each vying to promote their wares. Shoppers are seen bargaining, creating a lively scene. Remarkably, the lid of this vessel, with a diameter of only 28.8 centimeters, features 35 distinct human figures. The arrangement is well balanced, with each figure exhibiting different expressions and poses.
The lid of a Dian vessel features a relief sculpture of 10 women. A tall noblewoman with large eyes and a tall nose kneels atop the central drum, her entire body gilded, surrounded by vessels such as pots d'eau, a type of ancient Chinese vessel, and plates. 3 maids stand beside her, offering food boxes and holding umbrellas, kneeling and awaiting orders. Around her are 2 figures, one sitting and one standing, facing each other as if organizing threads. 4 others sit on the ground facing the center, weaving cloth using a waist loom. These different actions reflect different stages of the weaving process. The waist loom, also known as a squatting loom, was a relatively simple weaving tool used before the advent of the slant loom. It mainly consists of a warp beam, warp divider, cloth beam, width support, weft beater, weft insertion tool, carrying strap, heddles, and other accessories. Even today, some ethnic minorities in Yunnan still use the squat loom. A rubbing of a scene decorating the shoulder of a bronze drum from Shizhaishan, showing a Dian aristocrat being carried by natives in a sedan chair. This statue of a Dian Mongoloid servant is shown in a kneeling position while holding a parasol, presumably to shade a white Zhou noble. Belt buckles feature scenes of boars fighting panthers and lions locked in combat. Dian bronze work shows steppe influence, animal combat scenes, recumbent deer motifs, certain buckle forms. Similar Scytho-Siberian motifs appear in contemporaneous burials at Majayuan in Gansu and also in the Ordos region. The most famous Dian artifact is a low bronze ritual table in the shape of a cow being mauled by a tiger and yet still standing protectively over its calf. The Dian Gallery in the Yunnan Provincial Museum shows many foreign objects dug up locally, including a buckle representing a winged lion, lions, winged or otherwise, being unknown in China back at that time, seemingly from Persia or Afghanistan, agate beads from Pakistan, and glass from India. Archaeological data strongly points to an established system of inherited elite status and wealth. The presence of extensive grave goods, weapons, and a hierarchical settlement pattern indicates a society with established social stratification and an elite class that likely held elevated social status. Elite burials were characterized by abundant and high-quality bronze artifacts, weapons, elaborate belt sets, and rich grave goods. The discovery of the gold seal of the Dian king from a tomb at Shizhaishan is a prime example of their high status. A gilt bronze buckle depicting 2 figures dancing atop a snake was unearthed in burial number 13 in Shizhaishan, Jining County. The figures have long prominent noses and large deep-set eyes. They wear distinctively Central Asian or Zhou dynasty clothing with swirling saka-like patterns all over their jackets and trousers. They carry long sword scabbards attached to their belts. They're shown in dynamic, exaggerated poses, with one figure holding a flat disc and the other seemingly juggling or interacting with the snake. The snake was a common and often sacred motif in the arts of the Zhou dynasty, including the state of Chu, where many snake patterns were frequently used. The panchi, an important motif during the Zhou dynasty, refers to intricate dragon patterns used on bronze mirrors and vessels that became extremely popular, originating in the southern Chu state during the Eastern Zhou period.
The gilded bronze buckle depicting two dancers, unearthed from tomb number 13 at Shizhaishan, adorned the waistbands of ancient Dian people over 2,000 years ago. The depiction of exotic dancers on the buckle retains the imprint of cultural exchange between ancient Dian and foreign lands.
这两个人的话，我们仔细看，这两个人鼻梁特别高，眼睛特别凹陷，这个可能和欧罗巴人种有关系。他的服装，包括他人的造型，都和我们本地的滇人是不一样的。这衣服在那个牛仔裤一样的，非常的贴身。云南呢，当时因为气候比较炎热，所以说当时的男性呢，一般穿的是短裤或者是短裙这样子。他手上拿着两个盘子在进行舞蹈杂技一样的杂耍，我们叫盘舞，爱人盘舞 cos。
Archaeological evidence, such as depictions of Europoid horsemen in Central Asian clothing in Dian bronzes, have led many to conclude that white Scythian people had ruled the region. Key archaeological evidence supporting this connection includes hunting scene depictions of mounted Europoid horsemen engaged in hunting or in conflict with rival tribes, often arranged in a circular design on the surface of bronze drums, very similar to Scythian art. The horsemen in these depictions appear to be wearing Central Asian-style clothing. Animal-style art motifs such as felines attacking oxen are reminiscent of Scythian animal-style art in both theme and composition. Many other figures also display unmistakably Europoid facial features. Due to the fact that many of the Dian kingdom's elite figures were portrayed with prominent Europoid traits, a modern artistic interpretation of a Dian kingdom warrior from the Yunnan Provincial Museum shows a statue of a Dian elite warrior with white European facial morphology, long dreadlock hairstyle, prominent nose, large deep-set eyes, thin lips, and a pointed chin riding a horse barefoot, tattooed with writhing snakes on his legs. The rulers of Dian were originally a band of Scythians, previously belonging to the aristocracy of the state of Chu, who had lorded over the locals in Yunnan until the Han dynasty turned up to turn the tables. Han invasion of the Dian kingdom. In 135 BCE, the Han envoy Tang Meng brought gifts to Duotong, the king of Yelang, which bordered Dian, and convinced him to submit to the Han. The Jianwei commandery was established in the region. In 122 BCE, Emperor Wu dispatched 4 groups of envoys to the southwest in search of a route to Daxia in Central Asia. One group was welcomed by the king of Dian, but none of them were able to make it any further, as they were blocked in the north by the Sui and Kunming tribes of the Erhai region, and in the south by the Di and Zhuo tribes. However, they learned that further west there was a kingdom called Dianyue, where the people rode elephants and traded with the merchants from Shu in secret. In 111 BCE, Emperor Wu of Han ordered the barbarian tribes of Jianwei Commandery to raise troops for the campaign against Nanyue. Fearing that neighboring tribes would attack them in the absence of their men, the tribe of Julan rebelled against the Han and killed the governor of Jianwei Commandery. After Nanyue was defeated, Han forces turned north and subjugated the various tribes of Yalang, Julan, Tulan, Qiang, Zhuo, Ran, and Mang. The Dian kingdom was annexed by the Han under the reign of Emperor Wu of Han in 109 BCE, and the Yizhao Commandery established. The Dian king willingly received the Chinese invasion in the hopes of assistance against rival tribes. It was at this time he received his seal from the Chinese and became a tributary. Emperor Wu sent Wang Ranyu to persuade the White King of Dian to submit, pointing out that many of the neighboring tribes had already been defeated. The king of Dian was initially reluctant to accept the offer, for he still possessed some 30,000 troops, as well as the allegiance of the nearby Laojin and Mimo tribes. However, in 109 BCE, Han troops from Ba and Shu wiped out the Laojin and Mimo, leading the king of Dian to surrender.
The path ahead is fraught with peril, but our alliance will see us through.
While Dian became Yizhou Commandery, the king was allowed to continue his rule until a rebellion during the reign of Emperor Zhao of Han. The Han proceeded with colonization and conquered the people of Kunming in 86 and 82 BCE, reaching all the way to what is now modern-day Myanmar. After this, the small number of white Scythian Zhou elites blended with the surrounding Mongoloid tribes and the Han Chinese, contributing to the small percentage of West Eurasian ancestry in the Han population. The Dian kingdom was conquered by the Han Empire in 109 BCE and turned into a tributary state. As the following centuries went by, the Dian assimilated into Han Chinese culture and were virtually extinct by the 11th century CE. It is apparent in the artifacts uncovered by archaeologists in the area. Mirrors, coins, ceramics, and bronze items manufactured in the Han style have been found in modern Yunnan. Dian artifacts, once visually distinct from the Han, borrowed heavily from Han imports by 100 BCE, indicative of Dian's assimilation into Han Chinese culture. Sinification of these peoples was brought about by a combination of Han imperial military power, regular Han Chinese settlement, and an influx of Han refugees. Yizhou Commandery was established in the former kingdom. Dian's surrender was verified by archaeologists who discovered an imperial seal inscribed by the Han for the king of Dian. There were a series of unsuccessful rebellions by the Dian natives against Han rule. The first two incidents occurred in 86 BCE and 83 BCE. A rebellion in 35 BCE to 28 BCE was suppressed by Chen Li, governor of the Zhangke Commandery. More violence surfaced during Wang Mang's usurpation of the Han emperor and reign in 9 to 23. Wang responded by dispatching military campaigns against the southwest. One campaign lost 70% of its soldiers due to illness. Another, with 100,000 men and twice the amount of supplies, had little success. Rebellions also occurred in 42 to 45 and 176. During Emperor Ming of Han's reign in 57 to 75, the Han expanded further west of Dian and established a new commandery called Yongchang. In 114, Dian tribes residing west of Yueshi-Yuesui Commandery accepted Han rule. Emperor Huan embarked on a Sinicization campaign during his reign between 146 and 168 that introduced Han Chinese ethics and culture to the Dian tribes, including both the Mongoloid natives and the mixed-race partial descendants and very small number of white descendants of their former Scythian masters. The Dian themselves disappeared from history around the time that the Grand Scribe's records wrote about them. Genetic studies have provided insights into the general population of the ancient Dian culture region, revealing diverse ancestries, but there has been no focus on the Dian kingdom's elite burials. There are no published ancient DNA studies specifically analyzing elite burials from key Dian kingdom sites such as Shizhaishan or Lijiashan. Crucially, no ancient DNA has ever been published from the high-status tombs at Shizhaishan or Lijiashan, the ones with the Europoid-looking bronze figures. Chinese authorities have not permitted sampling of those elite burials, suggesting political sensitivities from the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese government is notorious for their Orwellian censorship of inconvenient facts. For example, according to Ed Wong's New York Times article from 2008, Victor Mayer was prohibited from leaving China with 52 genetic samples from the white Europoid mummies which were discovered in the Tarim Basin. However, a Chinese scientist clandestinely sent him half a dozen, on which an Italian geneticist performed tests. Since then, China has prohibited foreign scientists from conducting research on the mummies. In general, China will censor any archaeological or genetic findings which do not align with their agendas. It appears as if the last Dian king, already deprived of power, took all the valuables with him to the grave, including the state seal, which he had no right to do under the Han laws. Other representatives of the Dian aristocracy followed his example. As a result, the high Dian culture ceased to exist. In the end, the lost Scythians of Dian vanished as completely as their dreadlocked horsemen faded from the bronze tableau. By the first centuries of the Common Era, the last thin strain of Zhou-Scythian blood had dissolved into the swelling tide of Han settlers and the older Tibeto-Burman substratum of Yunnan. The barefoot, snake-tattooed lords who once rode bareback over the highland lakes, lording it over bound Mongoloid captives with the casual cruelty of steppe aristocrats, left behind only golden seals, tiger-mauled oxen, and drums whose sunburst lids still show faces with deep eyes and tall noses commanding darker armies. The Han Empire, itself the creation of the very black-haired commoners the Zhou had once ruled, closed the circle. The conquerors of the conquerors rewrote the Southwest in their own image. Today, in the humid galleries of the Yunnan Provincial Museum, the gilded elite woman still kneels atop her drum, parasol raised by kneeling servants, frozen forever in a hierarchy that no longer exists. Testimony to a brief violent moment when the far-western heirs of the Eurasian steppe ruled, however fleetingly, at the edge of the East. The Scythians of Dian, the proudest and most far-flung fragment of the ancient Aryan world, were absorbed like rain into the immense yellow earth, sealed away with the gold seal of a forgotten king beneath the quiet waters of an ever-expanding lake.